cable TV. Call to order the North Miami Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. Meeting is now in session. Maybe stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Madam Secretary, can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Ernst?
Present.
I should say Chairman. Commissioner Blemire?
We don't hear you too well.
Commissioner Blemire?
Not present as of yet, so
okay.
she may be
I know
late.
she did say she was going to come.
All right.
Okay. Commissioner McDermott?
Present.
Commissioner Each? Commissioner Medina?
Present.
Commissioner Clark?
Present.
Commissioner Bob?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I understand we do have an amendment to the agenda. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
Yes, to the minutes.
To the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
So item PC 1735, on the third commissioner who voted no was Bob, so I just need to include his name there. It just says commissioner. And that's it.
Okay, which,
On the minutes 17, PC 1735.
okay, everybody got that on the, was on the vote
Yes.
on the minutes. There's a correction, there was an edit, the name was deleted or left off,
Right.
and the correction is the commissioner who voted no was who again, please?
Commissioner Bob?
Commissioner Bob. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, there's no other amendments?
Unless
Okay.
someone else has some amendments.
Call for a motion to approve the minutes. Mr. McDermott approves the minutes. Do I have a second? And Dr. Medina seconds the minutes. And we'll wait for Ms. Lemur to step forward. Do I need to do this again now that she sits down, or can we go ahead and proceed? Okay. Well, we just approved the minutes, Ms. Lemur. Okay, let's move on then. Any communications from staff?
Yes, sir. At our last meeting, we were unsure whether we would have items for June. We actually have a quite full agenda for June 7th, will be our next Planning Commission meeting.
Can you tell me how many items you will have on that agenda at this time?
9.
9.
3 of them will be housing items, which are pretty straightforward. You see them every year. It's not the CBOs, it's the action plan, an amendment for next year, an amendment to the current year, and then another item. I don't have that information.
So we do have some public hearings
Yes, sir.
on all of them, any of them quasi-judicial?
Except for the housing items, yes, there will be some quasi-judicial.
All right. Taking note of the number, I asked if the staff has a problem with tackling this on one night, or would we want to try to arrange making this into 2 nights for this meeting, since there are 9 items that we would have. So I welcome anybody's input into how we decide.
I would think that, we might, I'd be open to a second night to divide the number.
I see, Ms. Blimmer, you're in agreement, Chief?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Charlie. So
There's 9 items scheduled for June, the June meeting.
I'm going to be out of town.
Okay, so you would be out of town for both?
I'm going to be out of town from, I gave Mike the dates.
Okay,
I'll be out of town for about 3 weeks.
okay. Dr. Medina?
I'm with you guys.
Let's split it, 2
Split it.
meetings. Mr. Bob?
I'm kind of of the mindset of just kind of get it all done with, so.
You would be fine with 1 night?
It would definitely be a long night.
And that's June 9th, right? Yeah. June 9th is a Thursday.
June 7th.
Okay.
So would it be, let me ask you this.
June 7th?
There's a,
June 7th.
Debbie, I'm sorry, you said June the 7th?
Yes, sir.
I might be late that day. I'd be back in town by that day, but I have to go to a graduation.
Mr. Clark, do you have any objections to one night, or would you split it to two?
I'm fine with either.
With one night?
No,
Oh,
we can split it into two nights
split.
to make sure that we give it
All right.
enough time.
So we have a majority then, Mr. Bob, wants to split it. The next question would be how we would want to do this over either a 2-week period, because I believe we have is there a commission meeting the following Tuesday?
Yes, sir, that's, they have a meeting on June 14th. Typically, when we do these special meetings, we typically try to find a Thursday. So it could either be the Thursday the 9th, or you could go the following week on a Thursday.
Okay, let's all look at Thursday the 9th. Everybody want to look at their calendar there, or they have any feelings about, that would just be one day between the first meeting and the second meeting? First meeting on the 7th, second meeting on June 9th.
And it could be that the way you set it, sir, is that you go to a certain point, and then you have the second meeting as a
Finish up,
finish up if you
Right.
have to.
correct. All right, so that would leave it open in case we got done with everything on the first night. But it depends upon if we have a lot of public input, which we would certainly want to allow, and if the presentations are longer than expected, I don't want it to be a 4-hour, 5-hour marathon for the night. 4 hours is enough. 11 o'clock, I think, would be a time to where we're in a kind of a golden hour of decision. So
7th with a 9 to the backup.
how is everybody on the 9th as the,
I'm available.
okay,
I'm available.
okay. And you're good?
I'm also
I'm
available.
good, Mr. Bob and Mr. Clark?
I teach on Thursdays, so I'll be a little late.
All right. Okay,
That date was June the 9th?
June the 9th.
Yeah, I can be in
Thursday. Okay, so we do have a majority, so the follow-up meeting would be June 9th if necessary. If everybody's in agreement, then we'll set that. Thank you very much, Ms. Love, for taking care of that. Okay, any other communications you have with us, ma'am?
No, sir.
All right, any continued public hearings?
No, sir, we do not.
Very good. So I'm going to go ahead and start the public hearing and check with Mr. Hill. We don't have any quasi-judicial proceedings tonight.
No, sir.
Do you need to read anything into the record at this point regarding anyone that's not here at the meeting or communicating with the public? Or
No,
we're good with that?
those provisions do not apply to legislative matters.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's begin the public hearing. The first item on tonight's agenda is PC 17-38. This is an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending Volume 1 Goals, Objectives and Policies of the city of North Miami 2016 Comprehensive Plan, more specifically, the future land use element thereof, in accordance with the requirement of Section 163.3184, parentheses 3, Florida Statutes 2021, and Chapter 29, Articles 3, Division 11, or is that Division 2? Division 11, Sections 3-1, 102, parentheses A, and Sections 3-1105 through 3-1110 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinance by amending the future land use element at Policy 1.15.1 to combine the primary and secondary pools of floating dwelling units, providing for an initial hearing and subsequent transmittal of the proposed amendment to the reviewing agencies and or any interested local government or governmental agency for review under the expedited state review process, providing for an adoption, hearing, and subsequent transmittal of the proposed amendment, as may be amended to respond to comments from the reviewing agencies to the state and land planning agency for determination of completeness, providing for repeal, conflicts, severability, correction of scrivener's errors, and effective date. May we have the staff report, please? And Debbie, if you could, somewhere along the line, point out where the text amendment is on, so we get time to go look for that, because I know there's just one particular addition to it that I wanted to talk about, and you'll probably
Okay,
have that in your report.
all right. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commission members. For the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. Before you is a comprehensive plan amendment and an accompanying land development regulation amendment, combining the residential pools. Let me make sure, there you go. In 2007, the city established pools of residential dwelling units to be used in very specific areas. They also established a pool of non-residential floor area that could be used throughout the city, particularly in the NRO. In 2015, they came back and modified it, tweaking it a bit more, and as it reads today, there are 2,500 units that are to be used within the NRO. There are 2,500 units that can be used elsewhere in the city. There's also another pool of units for the special development transit-oriented area up north. And then the non-residential floor area pools. What this amendment is going to do, one of the things that we've discovered is that the majority of the requests through the conditional use permit process that comes before you has been for development outside of the NRO. So we're rapidly running out of those units. As of the last time I checked, there were about 333 left in the outside of the NRO pool. So by combining the two pools, it would allow those units to be dispersed throughout the city, with the exception of like in Solomia or in the SDTOD. Solomia is within the RAC, and the RAC and Solomia also has a set of their own conditional units, conditional use permit. So it wouldn't be used there, it would be used elsewhere. Because of most of the overlays that we have in the city, the underlying zoning does not allow residential use. So through the conditional use permit is how you're getting the mixed use development in the city. So this amendment is part of the follow-up LDR. So this is amending policy 115.1 to combine the pools. And then to allow them to be used elsewhere except for those areas I was explaining to you before. The idea for this would be to allow the development to continue, because as we're seeing, the NRO is the bulk of the NRO has a lot of residential, single-family residential homes. And so while they can go in and build in it, get a conditional use permit, request units, the majority is not happening there. It's really happening elsewhere in the city. For example, as you saw, you had Emblem Tower, that's over on 7th Avenue. You have, we just did the Cyberplace Apartments, that's outside of the NRO. Aliro, which was further north, again, outside of the NRO. We've only had really maybe 2-3 since it's been established that has actually within the NRO. So this will allow this to continue to move forward. We'll continue to be able to get housing units and mixed-use development throughout the city by combining those pools. And that's so let me pull back up there. There you go. So what's going to happen next is this would go to City Council on the 14th, and then the amendment, because it affects this entire city, It's what's called a large-scale amendment. So it has to get transmitted to the state and to all the agencies, the surrounding communities for comment. And then whenever that comes back, once we transmit it, it generally comes back within 45 days, thereabouts. And then we would have the second hearing, assuming there wasn't a whole lot of comments that came from the state or from the other agencies. If there are, we have to address those, and then it would come back for second reading. After second reading, after it's been adopted and then accepted by the state, it's effective 31 days after it's accepted by the state as being complete. And with that, that's pretty much the end of my presentation on this particular item.
Debbie, when we allotted all of these, we divided them up, all these different categories of the NRO and the transit area overlay district and everything. What was the reasoning that we didn't just have one large pool to take from with the way that we're wanting to do it now? What was the driving factor for why we wanted to kind of divide up X amount of units per each one of these overlay districts?
Well, at the
because,
time-
you know, at one point there must have been a reason for it, and I want to make sure that it was a good reason or just not thinking right when we did it, because 2006, 2007 is a long time ago, and I don't remember that far back as to why this was divvied up this way. Can you enlighten me a little bit?
I'd be happy to, sir.
The change of mind here.
Sure, that's a very good question. At the time, the desire was to focus development in the central city district, which included the NRO. That was to be the focus of development in the city, is in this downtown NRO area. That's the reason, and it was originally set up first that all the units were going to be in the NRO, and then it was divvied up inside and outside. So now we're just seeing that that's just not happening, and development is going outside of the NRO, and because, as I said to you before, the majority of the NRO consists of some commercial corridor, but primarily single-family homes. So you've got 3 commercial corridors that run within the NRO, 125th, a portion of 6, and a portion of West Dixie. Everything else is single-family and/or multifamily housing units. So they wanted to focus development here. We're seeing now, after, as you said, things change over time. And we're seeing that that's really not where development is wanting to go.
Well, I guess now with this amendment, are we in effect creating one pool if we're combining everything? So that pool was up for grabs for whatever amount we would decide as a commission or with the staff
No,
themselves.
you
As
can't
to how many
change-
we would draw out of that.
No, you can't change the number. The number.
No, not the number, but I mean, as far as somebody in a overlay district. In other words, the overlay districts don't matter anymore, is what you're saying, though, right?
No, sir.
If somebody in,
No, sir. The overlay districts still matter because you still are only allowed on, let's say you're on West Dixie and you're on the West Dixie PCD corridor. It's 125 dwelling units per acre on that overlay, the PCD overlay. So the overlays are still there. What happens is now you've got one pool of floating units that everyone draws from except for the SDTOD and the RAC area. And it distributes wherever the market is calling for. So until they're gone. Now all of those units were already built in the concurrency at the time. And so it's not going to impact concurrency or the level of service because you're not changing any of the numbers. Still the same numbers, it's just now being distributed throughout the city.
but how would you regulate number of, if somebody wants to come in and take a whole lot of units and not leave, raise the pool, so to speak?
It's first come, first served, it's always been first come, first served. And when they're gone, they're gone. Now,
Okay.
one of the things that we're talking about as at the staff level and at the administration is the need to look at the infrastructure as to what happens once these are gone. Because then you would, all your overlays, all the great work that you all have done over the many years, it will stop. And the only thing that you have is what your underlying zoning would allow you to have. So if you're in a commercial and there are no residential and you're in an overlay that would normally allow you to pull from that, you can't do anything. So it's
Right.
going to be important during the comprehensive plan update. One of the tasks that Public Works is looking at is what are the levels of service? And then if we want to have build out using those scenarios of what's allowed in the overlays, what do we need for infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, drainage? So that study is going to be part of our comprehensive plan update, but it's already, Public Works is already starting that process to have that done. But like as I said, once these units are gone, they're gone.
Any questions before I open up the public hearing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Through you to Debbie. Debbie, so what is the total going to be after we do the combining?
Well, as I said, as of the date this ordinance was written, there were 2295 left in there, but that number is going to change between now and city council because we've already had some other applications come in that are requesting floating units. So this number, once it goes to city council, it will be a locked-in number, but this number will change because at the date when Jennifer and I prepared this ordinance, there were 2295 remaining in both pools as a total. So we would just be moving whatever the total is into this pool. We won't be changing the total in any fashion. We just have to update it now based upon these two applications I received this week.
Any other questions to staff?
You know, I just want to bring up, I forget how many years ago the Public Works Director was here. And one of the things that I get confused on is, okay, we have a capacity right now, 5,000 units, was that correct?
5,000 additional units over what it is already allowed in the underlying zoning districts.
Okay. 5,000 additional units.
Correct,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Now, I hear, well, it's because of the infrastructure, either the sewer or the water lines. Well, I look at people that we service outside of the geographical boundaries of the city of North Miami. We service FIU, Quayside, all these developments that are going up. And I never quite understood, doesn't that have an impact on our infrastructure? I mean, they have to spring for it. FIU has to spring for it. They're developing like crazy out there. We have developments going up on Biscayne Boulevard that use our systems. We go out west, outside the boundaries. I think we go to 22nd Avenue or 27th. I don't remember
Something like
exactly.
that, yes, sir.
And it might be a good idea when we do the comp plan to get the Public Works Director in here again and find out exactly how this puzzle fits together, because that's the only thing I'm suggesting, that when we do that, we get a better handle on it, because a lot of times the argument's made, well, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have this, we don't have that, but in fact we do. And I think it would be a good idea just to bring him in or ask him some questions before we all have a level playing field. That's what I'm saying.
Well, when these studies are done and these reports are done, they will consider, they like the water supply master plan that you all approved not long ago, actually broke out the city versus the other areas they serve.
Oh, it did?
It does. It
Oh,
does.
okay.
So
All
all
right.
of this will
No,
break
I
it out
stand to be
separately.
corrected. Okay.
And then, but right now what they did was they didn't look at what our overlays would allow. They based it on typical population growth of 7%, which is a curve growth that's normal. They did not look, so right now their population in the master plans project at exactly what we have now, no more. So it can handle the capacity of these additional 5,000 units and the current population, but no more growth beyond that. So that's the reason we need them to update this, look at it, find out what we need, because there's a growth that's going to naturally occur for those overlays. Because you want them to go where you want them to go, the development to go. So that's what those overlays for, that's what those PCDs are for, and that's what the Transit Station Overlay District is for, and that's what the SDDOT is for. And so that's what your studies will look at. That's what the study that they'll get back, and our comprehensive plan, as we're doing that, will consider the growth, the build-out scenario of what could possibly happen, the max population based upon these overlays.
We certainly can't create any more overlay districts than what we have now. I mean, we've
Right.
got overlays on overlays as it is. If there's any other quick questions to staff, I'm going to go ahead and open the, yes, sir, I'm sorry, Mr. Clark.
No, you're fine. Is it, I guess where I'm struggling, or my question would be is, the idea of having the separate pools was to use it as an incentive to attract development into the NRO. The fact that now we are pooling it, wouldn't that detract from that incentive? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I get your question. We're not getting development in the NRO, so that has not been an incentive to come into the NRO. The bulk of our projects that we're getting in is outside of the NRO. It's challenging inside the NRO because the majority is single-family homes. So people find it really, developers find it challenging, you know, to fight the community. And often the community doesn't even realize they're in the NRO and they could have this development around them. So this is a first step in adjusting to really where the market has requested, and it's outside of the NRO. And I think the community, that's NRO has been in place since 2005. And the pools have been in place since 2007. We had 1980 something left of the 2,500 in the NRO, and we only have 300 and something left on the outside.
So then, as a city, is our goal still to develop the NRO, or is it right now to follow what the market is doing?
Well, by doing this, you're actually, it's actually a policy change now. It's to focus where the market is going, because those units are unused, and the market is not taking us into the NRO.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward. Seeing none, hearing none, public hearing is now closed. Any further comments from any of the other commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion. We have a motion to approve the item, seconded by Dr. Medina. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. All, anyone opposed? No, okay, so the item carries with majority staff. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next item. You'll have to give me a second here because we have a couple of changes and some new sheets of us handed here. I want to make sure they got the right section here. Next item, I believe, is PC 17-36. And this is an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending chapter 29 of the city of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations, specifically at Article 4, Division 2, Sections 4-205, entitled Floating Units Allocations, to combine the primary and secondary pools of floating dwelling units and further clarify the non-residential pool. In accordance with Sections 3-302 and Section 3-1004 through 3-1007 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Chapter 29, entitled Land Development Regulations, providing for repeal, conflicts, severability, codification, and for an effective date. Staff report, please.
Once again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. The item, this particular item is now the implementing LDR. You all approved the comp plan amendment, and this is now adjusting the land development regulations. So you'll see that in section 4205, this really, it's a little more detailed. You have a little more detail always in your LDRs. So you'll see that it breaks out the pools a little more clearer than they are now. It establishes not a primary and a secondary, but a residential pool that consists of the 2295, which will be adjusted before City Council, for use, and it spells it out. The NRO, the PCD, the PD, exclusive of Solomia, North Miami Transit Station Overlay District, and multifamily districts outside of the SDTOD through the conditional use permit process. Then it also establishes, or it takes that pool, the secondary pool consisted of floating units and commercial floor area, and it now takes and puts those two together, the two NRO outside in the residential, and creates a commercial pool of the 750,000 square feet. It's for use again within the NRO, PCD, and the North Miami Transit Station Overlay District through the conditional use permit process. It also slightly adjusts the language specifically as it moves on down, like it strikes outside of the NRO. So it's just cleanup language beyond that. And again, with that in mind, this will also be heard at the 524 City Council meeting, but it has to wait until the comp plan amendment comes back for second reading, and then they'll be heard together for second reading. Second reading for the comp plan, second reading for this. Once the second reading occurs, and technically it's effective 10 days after the adoption, but because the comp plan has that 30-day waiting period, it really doesn't go into effect until 31 days. The same time the comp plan goes in amendment, this LDR will go into effect. That's the end of staff's presentation, sir.
Again, we're looking at 1,800 is the number of, I'm looking at the three pools of floating units, a pool of 1,800 floating dwelling units. What am I looking at then if I'm?
It's actually 2,295, units.
I'm looking at the wrong.
And then the commercial pool of 750,000 square feet. In the overlay district, for example, you have multifamily that has no commercial use normally. So under the overlay, they could do a mixed-use development, and they would be assigned, they could pull from that pool of commercial property.
Okay, I want to make sure that I'm looking at the. Yeah, I'm looking at, am I looking at the one we just did? Dimensions, the 1,800 floating dwelling units.
That's when it originally started, sir. That goes back to the original.
Oh, all right.
Looking at my staff report.
Oh, okay. Background, all right, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to find that. Okay, now I think I have found it. It's all under section 4-205 where the changes were made, correct? If I call your attention to everybody, if you're wanting to know what I'm looking at, there's no page number, but it's under Article 4 of the zoning districts, section 4-205, floating unit allocation, correct?
Mhm.
And then it's broken down. Okay.
Yeah, and remember that 2,295 will be modified because now it's the
All right. All right, I haven't. Okay. Any other questions? Anyone? All right,
So moved.
I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing on this. Public hearing is now open on this item. And that is, let me make sure I'm correctly stating this. That was item 17-36, is that correct?
39.
39. You have to forgive me, this is not set up on my book here very well. All right, public hearing is open. Anyone wishing to address this item, please step forward. This time, seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Open for planning commission discussion. Anyone wishing to address this any further? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Mr. McDermott moves for approval the item. Second to this item.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reach. All in favor of
Aye.
aye? Any objections? Seeing none, item moves unanimously. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Give me a second to regroup because I've scattered my pages all over the place here. Forgive me. So now we're looking at items PC 17-40. This is an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending chapter 29 of the city of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations at Article 5 entitled the Development Standards by amending Division 1 specifically at sections 5-101 entitled Accessory Uses and Structures and section 5-104 entitled Drive-Through Walk-Up Windows and Automated Teller Machines to allow drive-throughs as a permitted use in certain areas of the city in accordance with section 3-302 and section 3-1004 through 3-1007 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinance, Chapter 29, entitled Land Use Regulations, providing for repeal, conflicts, severability, codification, and for an effective date. Here we have staff report, please.
Yes, once again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. The item before you, and I'll let them pull the PowerPoint up, is amending those two sections of the code. One of the things that happened during COVID through many restaurants, including the restaurants here in North Miami, was a lot of people didn't want to go inside. And the new trend, and as you can read in my staff report, I give you guys a lot of background information, is that the trend now is expansion of drive-thrus. While the inside of the restaurants, some of them closed completely during the pandemic, the drive-thrus stayed open and did pretty well. And administration has asked that we move this particular item forward to allow drive-thrus. Previously, they were prohibited in the NRO, and were only allowed by special exception in C1, C2BE, C2BW, C3, and within the Arts and Overlay District. This amendment would modify that to not require a special exception, but require administrative site plan approval. It's not just a permitted. They have to do site plan approval. There are things with a drive-through that you want to make sure it's designed properly, that it doesn't back up, that it has plenty of room for queuing of the cars, that they're designed to not be in the front of the building, So it's not modifying the requirements, the design requirements for drive-throughs at all. We have a section that tells them how they can do it. That's section 5-104. The only thing we changed in there was drive-throughs shall not be permitted in the NRO district except those existing prior to the adoption of the regulations. So all of the design standards are still there. It's just now promoting, taking away some of the challenges of doing a drive-through. So that's really what this particular amendment does for you. We believe that based upon our analyses, this will definitely allow businesses to follow the new trends, which are drive-throughs, walk-up, pickup. They're actually changing the back of the house of many of these restaurants as they're designing to allow more pickup and more room for drive-throughs. So that's going to be the new normal trends in restaurants. And it actually allowed, people felt more comfortable going through the drive-through rather than going inside the restaurant. And those who do not have a drive-through really suffered because they had absolutely no way of having anybody, and they were challenged even with pickup. And so we believe this would allow additional opportunities for businesses. And
With that in mind, during the pandemic, which all this no doubt was brought about because of that, I'm thinking of one situation where a very popular restaurant on Biscayne Boulevard created a drive-through, and that was a Flanagan's, and they had space or limited space to do it. I was in a long line waiting to get ribs there. So did they have to get permission to do that? Or did a lot of these restaurants, because of the pandemic, just do this on their own without approval? And if they wanted to do it again, they would now have to have a permit to do it, correct?
oh, they still had to have a permit to do it. That doesn't change the permitting requirement. It just keeps them from having to go through the expense and time of going through the special exception process. They still have to design it the right way. They still have to meet all of those requirements. Some properties will be big enough that they can do it. Some may not, because they don't have the room. They can't meet the queuing requirements. They can't meet the layout requirements. They can't meet the landscaping requirements. But this gives the opportunity for those who can, to be able to do it, but they still have to come to us and do an administrative site plan review so that we can make sure they're meeting all of these requirements.
So a little storefront restaurant, let's say, wants to put a window in, they would have to have parking requirements included in that too?
Well, it's not the parking, necessarily the parking requirements, it's the queuing requirements. So, like a walk-up window, for example, they would be part of the square footage already calculated in, so they would not need additional parking. The drive-through, there are the lane queuing, so they don't go out into the road, they don't block the drive aisle, and they meet the layout requirements. So we want to help them to be able to achieve what they want to do and be more flexible with that, which is why administration has responded, asking us to move this particular item forward. And we do agree that we've seen that be a challenge for keeping our restaurants open, especially.
And I apologize I didn't realize you were not finished with your presentation.
That's
My
okay, sir.
apologies.
No,
You're
that's
making-
quite all right. I was just going to tell you
Please-
the
please
last thing,
continue.
the next step, so it wasn't that important. But again, this next step, my apologies, this is all good. Their May meeting is going to be full. So this item will go to them for first reading on the 24th, May 24th of this month, and it will go for second reading on 6/14. It becomes effective 10 days after it's adopted. That was all I was going to add to that, sir. And that's the end of my presentation, sir.
Very good. Any other questions from staff? Ms. Fulmer?
Hello, good evening. So traditionally, when you talk about drive-thrus, you're more than likely talking about fast food restaurants. And I understand that with what has happened with COVID, we know that a lot of different restaurants are getting creative with the way they sell their food. I'm just curious as to whether or not we're thinking about bringing more traditional fast food restaurants into the city, or are we looking to bring in non-traditional restaurants that would provide more healthier food for our community?
That's an excellent question. We're not proposing fast food because the new trend is really not just fast food. Fast food traditionally wants a drive-through. It's even fine dining restaurants. We've had requests for other types of restaurants here in the city. We've had a couple that wanted to go through the variance process, but it's very expensive, so they declined. But the new trend is actually fine dining as well, is actually opening up drive-throughs. So it's not necessarily just geared to fast food.
So specifically, so I'm understanding that the area that this change is going to be for is going to be within the NRO, correct?
That's one of the changes. It's prohibited now in the NRO, anybody to have a drive-through at all.
And how would we regulate to ensure that we're not getting more traditional fast food restaurants?
You don't have that ability. We do not have.
So once we open it, if another fast food restaurant decides to come in, we won't be able to restrict that?
No, you can't determine what businesses come into your city like that.
No, meaning, obviously, yes,
Sorry.
we cannot
I'm
dictate
sorry.
what comes in, but what would we like to see?
What would we like to see? Is that the question you're asking me?
Right. What is it that we would like to see? We're not dictating, but obviously the city has a vision. It has somewhat of an idea of what it would like the city to look like.
Well, whatever business comes in, they have to meet the criteria of the code. The code applies to everybody, whether you are fast food and you want to drive through, or you are fine dining and you want to do a drive through. The designs are still there. I'm going to let your counsel speak to this particular question, because that's a very good question, and I know right where he wants to address.
You do?
I do.
So there's actually a very interesting line of cases that deal with communities that try to design out these national chains. And it's actually a constitutional commerce clause question as to whether they have the ability to do that, because when you do that, it interferes with interstate commerce. Is that where you thought I wanted to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I love those cases. So you really need to be careful on the kinds of design criteria you develop that either encourages or discourages the location of particular kinds of businesses in your community.
We tried to do that in Alamorada when we first incorporated in Alamorada. We actually prohibited any sort of chain stores to come into Alamorada. That sat there for a little while and was overturned because of that particular clause.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
You take care?
Yes, sir. Dr. Medina? Question?
So in the same line of questioning, Aventura did that. Aventura got rid of all the fast food restaurants. The city of Aventura got rid of all the fast food restaurants and their drive-thrus. I am. So, I mean, I'm not a fan of drive-thrus at all. I mean, the drive-thru on Starbucks on 135, they go, it's against the traffic. I just can't believe it's allowed. And the drive-thru of the McDonald's right there, People are making a line to get into McDonald's, and you're stuck either in the middle of Dixie Highway and 125th, which is very dangerous, or behind, and you have to wait until the line is over. And I'm not changing lanes to get hit, so you know, I'm not a fan of drive-thrus at all, especially in that area. So I mean, it's drive-thrus bring a lot of traffic. We went through this when the Wendy's on 135th. I read the studies. This is not pretty. Drive-thrus are just a nuisance, and they affect negatively their neighborhoods. So, if the restaurants, I mean, I back up for pizza when the COVID. You just back up and they put the pizza in your trunk and leave. They're very creative. Yeah. So drive-thrus are a nuisance, and they pollute, and you have a line of cars there, and people are blasting their music, and no. So I'm not looking at this kindly.
Thank you, Dr. Medina. Any other questions to staff? Okay, if none, we can go ahead and call for a motion, either deny or approve this ordinance.
Motion to deny.
Second.
There's a motion to deny and a second. Yeah. We'll take a roll call on this. And I'll start with Commissioner Bob.
Is there a second?
Remember, this is a motion to deny. Commissioner Bob? Nay? No to the denial, right? Okay. Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Yes for the denial. Mr. Reach? Mr. Reach?
If I got this right, if I agree with the motion, I vote yes. If I don't agree, I vote no.
Right.
Okay, I vote no.
Dr. Medina?
Yes.
No, yeah, you're all right. I will vote no. Commissioner Ernst votes no. Mr. Mc... You voted for the...
Voted yes for the motion to
Right.
dismiss.
Yes. And I voted no. Mr. McDermott?
Yes.
Yes for denial, sir?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just, may I comment? It's just that I think it needs a little bit more clarification. I just think it needs more clarification.
Such as, sir?
well, we have the vote in. Your vote was yes
Was
for
no.
denial. And the result is, I believe it's
We have 1,
4-3.
4-3.
2, 3, 4 to 3.
Okay, 4-3, the item has been denied.
Correct.
Correct. All right. Staff, that'll be noted toward the, to the council that that item was denied. Now, that item will still be moved forward to the city council, right? And that and our board recommended denial of that ordinance. All right, great. Thank you very much. Let's move to the next item, and thank you everyone for your input on that. Appreciate it very much. Next and the last item on the agenda this evening, PC 1741, an ordinance of the mayor and the city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, amending chapter 29 of the city of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations at Article 5 entitled Development Standards by amending Division 1 and 16, specifically at section 5-101 entitled Accessory Uses and Structures, and sections 5-1611 entitled Mobile, food dispensing vehicles to modify the location where mobile food dispensing vehicles may operate in the city in accordance with sections 5-9.102, parentheses 2, Florida Statutes 2021, and sections 3-302 and sections 3-104 through 3-1007 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Chapter 29, entitled Land Development Regulations, providing for repeal, conflicts, severability, codification, and for an effective date. May we have staff report, please?
Thank you, sir. Once again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner, Community Planning and Development. The item before you is sponsored by Councilwoman Timothy. Let me get over to my page. My apologies, sir. She has asked that we, can you pull up the PowerPoint, please? Eduardo? Thank you. She asked that, she believes she wants to expand and allow some more entrepreneurial opportunities in the city by expanding the locations where food trucks, what we call the mobile food dispensing vehicles, how Florida statute terms it, can operate, because now, currently, as you all remember, it's limited to M1. Councilman Galvin, you all had passed it. It was allowed in certain commercial districts. Councilman Galvin revised it at City Council, limiting it to just the M1 districts. Councilwoman Timothy would like to expand it to allow it in C1 and C3. And the only reason C1 and C3 is she wants it associated as an accessory use to a laundromat or a mechanical car wash. And the only places those are allowed are C1 and C3 districts. So you'll see that in the ordinance, we modified those sections of the code under, my apologies, sir, under 5-101, the table of accessory uses. We expanded it. As you see, it's M1 currently, and they have to provide it, we have to do a site plan approval, so they have to come to us for site plan approval. She would like to expand it into C1 and C3, associated, as you can see, the number 3 on the footnote is in these districts, MFDVs shall only be associated with a permitted primary use of laundromat or mechanical car wash. That is her request, and that request is before you tonight. Again, this is going to go on the 524 City Council agenda, big agenda for them. Second reading on 6/14, and it will become effective 10 days after the adoption. That is the end of staff's presentation. Oh, my apologies. We also amended, my apologies. We also amended section 5:1611, which is all the standards for how you establish and you know what you have to do to have one. And so you can see where we amended section B there, authorized locations, to include the C1, C3 language associated with a laundromat or car wash. And we renumbered that section. Those were the changes. My apologies, I almost forgot that. And it's certainly up to you all to review and discuss.
Okay, another quick question, if I could, on this. Are there any other items or any other businesses within that, other than laundromat or mechanical car wash, that would want to also be included in this amendment? I just find it curious that why we are limiting it just to a laundromat or a mechanical car wash, when in fact there might be some other business that have said, well, wait a minute, I want to do it also within this district, but I can't. Was this looked at by staff to
No, sir.
address?
This is a
or-
request from Councilwoman Timothy, very specific request that she would like added, not for us to expand it beyond what you see in the ordinance.
If someone else came along and a different type of business other than this that right now is not in this language, how would that be addressed by staff? Just simply telling them that they can't do it, but yet their neighbor can do it?
They could apply to amend the ordinance and
Look for
go
a
through that
sponsor.
process. But they would have to pay for that, process. And right now, if this is approved by city council, anybody who comes in with any other use anywhere else outside of M1, they would be denied. Unless they request a text amendment and go through all the process like we're doing tonight with this.
Mr. Chairman, a question?
Yes. Ms. McDermott, we have a
That
couple of
was-
questions. Mr.
Just remind me
McDermott first, sir.
what's the M1 use?
That's their industrial district, sir?
Ms. McDermott.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Aren't we,
Through Debbie, so all of the, well, first off, there's already a truck thing at a car wash right now down the street. So it's already, yeah, I know. But anyway, so all the regulations that are in place for the M1 district, where the food trucks currently are, would be in place for these, correct?
That's right, sir. That's why you see nothing else in that section changed other than
The location.
adding the location, new location, and
Okay.
use.
Nothing changes except what, Debbie? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Chairman.
new location and the identification that it has is only associated with a laundromat or mechanical car wash.
So all the same restrictions that apply previously will be applied to this new category.
Okay.
so we're just adding those categories to an existing list of,
We're adding
of
new
categories.
locations with those limited two uses, two
Right.
primary uses.
The brewery that's on, 14th Avenue, Mike, the one that we had in the CRA,
Mhm.
the one south of 123rd Street, it was encouraged that they have a food truck down there.
But that's M1, correct? All that's
That's
permitted?
M1.
But what
They
I'm
can have
wondering-
one now
yeah.
in M1. They
So-
just meet all these requirements in M1. You can put your food truck.
So, but what I guess is, yeah, I'm at a loss of why we even need to put the language in there for a laundromat or a mechanical car wash.
That
If-
was the request of the councilwoman who wants to limit it to only those two uses, and those uses only occur in those particular zoning districts. Or only permitted in those two zoning districts. As my staff report says, the only commercial districts where these two uses may operate is in the C1 and C3 commercial districts. A laundromat is a permitted use in the C1 and C3 districts. Mechanical car wash is permitted use via a special exception in the C1 district, and food and beverage uses are allowed in both of those districts.
How many
So
car washes do we have, Debbie? Do you know off the top, half a dozen?
Gosh, no, I have no idea, sir.
I just,
The one that I used to go to that had the restaurant next to it, I thought that was great.
how about the
You
car
eat and
wash?
Get your car washed.
How about the car washes that are attached to a gas station? Would this be,
That's an accessory use. This has to be a primary use.
yeah, you come in, you pay, and you drive through?
Mhm.
Mr. Chair,
All right, I don't have any other questions. I'm sorry.
wh-
Counsel?
where is the section that talks about that it's only during operational of the primary use?
Operational standards, hang on a second, sir. Yes. It's under D4, and I have an extra period there.
4?
I believe it's D4. Hold on a second, sir, my apologies. Should be there.
Oh, it's under see.
Oh, thank
Three.
you. Say-
So there is a limitation that applies to all of these uses, that they're only allowed to operate during the businesses, the primary business's normal hours of operation.
Right.
So those two uses that are being proposed have extended hours at night, which would allow for those mobile food, whatever you call them, vehicles, to be used during those extended hours. So
Sure,
that
because
may
they have a
be-
24-hour laundromat.
That may be the connection between those particular uses. Just sharing.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Through you to council. So basically, if you had a 24-hour car wash or 24-hour laundromat, you could basically have a food truck there 24 hours, correct?
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
But I have not studied this to know whether there's another provision that would prohibit it, so staff?
It's anticipated, because most of our businesses that are associated with this don't function 24/7, but there is the ability, as long as those business hours are,
That's problematic with me as far as being 24 hours a day. That's a big problem. And so if I'll throw this out to everyone here if we want to discuss it. If staff, what if we put a time limit on there? Do we have that?
You
That purview?
you
Is
can
that
recommend
within our
this
purview?
with the condition that a time limit be added to those particular uses. For, if a use is in operation for 24 hours, they close at a particular time. Or if it's within a certain distance of like a residential property, like there are the, what was it, the drive-throughs. If it was within 100 feet of a residential property, there were certain restrictions. So if this particular property was within a certain distance, you can say 500 feet of a residential property, then maybe that should have some time limit. So whatever distance you think appropriate.
But we don't know. I mean, there's no,
Right.
we don't see anything physically here that can tell us, to give us guideline on this matter.
but you can
So-
make a recommendation that city council consider adding a operation hours limitation to any food truck, right? So it could
Council?
be that,
Yeah.
where it says it shall operate only during such business's normal hours of operation. It could be
Well,
something.
To them, that's
however, no
normal,
later
24-hour
than-
a day.
However, no later than 11 PM, because once you go after 11 PM, say as a restaurant, you then fall into a nightclub, which has all sorts of other
Exactly.
requirements you have to
Well,
deal with.
I mean, this is a late night town. My concern is people stopping off there at 1 o'clock in the morning
Sure.
with loads of cars pulling up to a car wash because they know they're gonna get food there. And this would be a problem for me to,
So there is a condition that requires each site to obtain administrative site plan approval. And that's something that can be reviewed when they come to staff. If there is something nearby that needs protection, staff would have the authority.
We would normally do that,
You
yes.
do that anyway.
Yeah.
but if we put it in
Okay.
writing, or if we put it in as a part of this ordinance,
Mhm.
saying that they must be closed by 11 PM on every night of the week or whatever, and regulated hours, then that would pass legal requirements. Is that correct, Counselor? Staff?
Well, however you
Understood.
want to draft it, whether it's a fixed closing or a subjective closing based upon the site conditions.
I mean, this is
It
like,
could be either
yeah,
way.
this is like the bars in Miami Beach with, the 2 o'clock ordinance. I mean, we have to look at it as a potential problem down the road if you have something that's available to the general public and them congregating at all times of night. And,
Right,
Yeah.
and we
Mr.
do
Chairman?
have
Yes.
other restaurants, like I said, after 11 o'clock. If they have music, or they're going to be serving liquor after that time, then they become a nightclub.
Right.
And not really a nightclub, but they have to follow the nightclub regulations, they have to get special approvals. So if you limit it to whatever that time frame is for a typical restaurant, that does seem reasonable.
So,
Through you,
Mr.
Mr.
McDermott.
Chairman, here's my concern. My concern is we sit here tonight, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 laundromats, and we have 1, 2 car washes, just within a short distance of where we meet. Right off the top of my head, we have 5 restaurants within that same closed area. You can't tell me that the food trucks are not going to negatively impact the local businesses. Okay? There's no question. I think, my opinion, I think we need to have some kind of distance requirements. I don't know if that's even workable. I know for a fact that 1 laundromat and 2 car washes within a short distance of where we are already have food trucks in operation. One of the food trucks was right over here, and as I went by, the owner of the shop next to where the laundromat is called me on my cell phone and said that the food truck had no regulations for people with their sandwich wrappers. And the parking lot was full of wrappers, and there's just so many things. I don't know. In other words, I don't have any objection to food trucks, obviously. I've voted for food trucks before. It's just when you have that kind, when you're sitting and there's like, 4 laundromats and 2 car washes right within a short distance of where we are, not mentioned all over the city, okay? And you have all these restaurants that are like right next door to them, there's going to be competition. It's going to affect the established businesses. I mean, that's just me. It's a wondering thing. Not that I'm, necessarily against food trucks. I just have a lot of questions. You know what I'm saying? I mean, am I making sense? Dan?
No, I understand what you're saying, my main concern again is the hours of operation,
Well, that could be part of it as well.
and that if we can't set a time frame, I'd be willing to pass this along with a recommendation of approval if we set a time limit on it. But that's not. I'm not sure that's even foolproof to solve the problem. Any other, the chair is open to any other.
well, I didn't have a comment. I just wanted to ask, Ms. Love, is it possible that we can revisit the standards that were originally set when we agreed to have the food trucks on this being separate from actually voting for them to actually have food trucks at the car washes and the laundromats with the time limit, because those are 2 separate things. And I do agree with Commissioner McDermott that, we voted on this to bring new business into the city. Now, if after we voting on it and they're here and they're not necessarily following the regulations, then what are the next steps there? I believe those are 2 separate items here.
I'm going to defer to Jennifer on the question of whether we can look at the standards now. I don't believe we advertised in changing the standards. We only
Right.
advertised for the locational change, but I'm going to ask our city
No,
attorney.
is it that the standards need to be changed or they need to be enforced? Because I believe when we voted for it, there were standards in place.
There are standards still there.
So
Those are the
maybe we
same
need to
standards you voted on.
reinforce them?
Yes, that whoever is operating in the city outside of M1 now is operating illegally. So it's a code violation.
Mm-hmm.
Which
What
is
this would
already
allow
happening, by the way.
is they have to get a permit, they have to be permitted. There's a whole approval process, as we talked about when you all passed this, that they have to go through. There are lots of standards they have to comply with, including litter, including all the things that you all put in place. They have to have, no food can be prepared or displayed outside of the vehicle. They have to take their litter away. They have to, they can't have music, loud music. They can't use flashing lights. You all approved all of those standards. So the first question you had is the second question actually is a code enforcement issue. Ms. Warren, would you like to respond to Ms. Lemur's question?
So I agree with Debbie Love. I mean, any food trucks that you're seeing that are littering or outside of the operational standards, that's addressed at a code enforcement level. I'm not sure what operational standards you guys are looking to change tonight.
So I don't think he was specifically talking about changing the operational standards. He's just, if I may, Commissioner, he's stating that currently with us approving it, these are the conditions that people are witnessing, that it is not being kept and it is not, the standards are not being met. And so now if we move to extend it more without addressing the current situations and having food, let's say for instance, if we decided that Monday through Friday, these food trucks can exist at car washes and laundromats up until 11 p.m., right? He's saying, well, while that would be great, that now opens the door for more littering or more food trucks that are operating and not keeping up standards. That's what he's saying. So as we move to open the door for more, we should kind of look back and ensure the ones that do exist are up to code and are following standards, so that as we move forward and invite more in, we don't have a bigger problem on our hands.
Understood. So as policymakers, as the legislative body, your job is to set and enforce all of the standards that you want to see the food trucks come into compliance with. Now, enforcement of that is a separate issue, separate and apart from our job and our duty in business tonight. That really is a code enforcement concern.
Correct.
Our job is to make it as perfect as you would like to see it. And if you aren't, as a citizen, seeing, if you as a citizen are going through the city and you are seeing violations, you would know it better than anyone. You are the legislative body. You adopted these standards. It is something that needs to be addressed through code enforcement. It may be something that they're not aware of. Maybe they're not seeing it. Certainly, you can put it as a recommendation along with the time limit recommendation that the city manager work through code enforcement to perform maybe an audit or review of the current licensed mobile food vendors to make sure that they're currently in compliance.
Well,
Thank you.
okay.
Mr. McDermott?
Yeah, I don't want to beleaguer the subject, but, at the same time, with the number of potential car washes and the number of laundromats that we have in this town, I just don't want to, I would not like to see a proliferation of food trucks everywhere that really are going to impact negatively local businesses that are already established. That's why I mentioned, as I say, I'm not against food trucks. It's just that I don't want to see a food truck on every street corner with all the problems that come with them. And that's why I mentioned, is there any kind of perhaps distance that we could, I know we have in the city distance regulations for other businesses. And I know that food trucks are, quote, moving targets. It's hard to do code enforcement when they could be here at 12 and gone at 1. It's hard to regulate them. But is there anything like that we could do? Or is this something that we need to take a closer look at? Or
Well, it would not be something you could come up with tonight, because
Right.
that distance separation requires specific analyses to be done. So while you could recommend that to city council, it certainly is not something that can be done tonight or between now
Well, I
and.
Well,
understand.
if we moved it, if we don't address this issue tonight, can we direct staff or the sponsor of this ordinance to rework it and bring it back to us?
Or we can
With the-
move to
with-
approve it with our specific recommendations.
Yeah, that's the appropriate one, because it's being sponsored by a council person. That's the appropriate way to move forward with it, is with your recommendations. You've got specific time limits you're interested in. You may be interested in them to consider a distance separation between food trucks. I don't know what else you could be thinking.
But no.
Mr. Clark?
The audit that that our deputy city attorney suggested, I think that definitely should be part of the suggestions.
So I'm okay, I'm
Oh.
fine with food trucks in the city. I guess, I just feel like picking laundromats and car washes is kind of arbitrary, and that's just in my opinion. So I'd be interested in knowing what staff has seen done other places or in other cities. I mean, are we even on the right track, starting with laundromats and car washes? Like, I think,
Well, if you recall, what came before you was a much broader ordinance. It allowed them in commercial districts as but it did have some very specific requirements and some specific limitations that we had in there. But it was allowed in commercial districts associated with a business as an accessory use. It wasn't specifically a car wash but this is what the councilwoman is asking for at this time, is it to be limited to only the laundromats and car washes.
And I mean, you can think of it, look at it as a consumer, right? So it's just an add-on. If you go wash your car, you're sitting there, you're waiting, you might, want to grab something to eat. It makes sense, I get it. Even with the laundromat, you think someone who's physically going to the laundromat, going to wash their clothes, they're there for a couple of hours, and if the food truck is there, they might just go and grab something to eat. It makes sense. Nevertheless, I think that we can move forward with voting on it with our specific amendments, if you will, or considerations, and let them make a choice.
Okay, so
The chair is open to anyone that wants to,
Mr. Chair?
yes, sir, go ahead, I'll let you speak.
So when we visited before about the food trucks, there was a resident that make a public comment, and she addressed the Evios Pizza, particularly regarding when Johnson and Well was there. They brought food trucks, and it was a mess for them, and she said that they lost business and this and that, or I don't remember who actually brought that, but
lady, yeah.
but I went to Evios and I spoke with the owners. They welcome food trucks because it brings more people, and also Bagel Bar East was mentioned. Again, I went and spoke with the owner, and he is going to put a truck himself. So this is a country that is based on, freedom of for entrepreneurs. So I mean, food trucks, they sell tacos. I like it. But with the suggestions, I think it'll be fine at 11 p.m. and I guess 11 and a time frame, and also, to make sure that code enforcement, to perhaps, tell the administration that they have to enforce, the cleaning, which is on the rules. They have to have a basket, and they have to leave the place clean when they leave. And so all of those things were addressed before. It's just a question of enforcement, like our attorney said. If it's enforcement, I mean, I call code and compliance all the time. it's like fun to me. Yeah, so, I mean, so, with that, I think, I mean, I haven't watched in a laundromat in decades, but I remember when I was a kid, it was, the only thing they have was those vending machines, that was horrible. So,
Can we
and the
make
car
a-
wash, they do, I'm pretty sure they welcome one, the one I go.
Can we make a motion?
Well,
Let me just
in
make
the-
sure
in the
I'm
motion
picking
now, I
up.
want
I
to
think
make it.
You still have more
Oh,
discussion.
I'm sorry, yes, sir,
No,
Mr.
I'd,
Clark.
I'd, I'd be open to even, I'd like it to see it in more of a commercial.
Expand
Yeah,
the use.
expanding it beyond,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, that's open for discussion.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
So now we want to formulate all our
Motion.
recommendations here so that we can get this motion.
So if I may
going.
read back to you what I see, or I've heard, make sure I'm hearing everything. Mr. McDermott was interested in a distance separation. He
Distance.
can't
Distance
come up-
and hours of operation.
I'm going to list them, make
Okay.
sure we're picking them all up. A distance separation, however, that's something that needs to, proper study in
Bless you.
order to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll let Ms. Warren repeat her comment.
Requesting the city manager to direct code enforcement to perform an audit of existing food trucks to look for any violations of the city code.
Very good.
Okay, that's number 3.
That's number two. That's number two. That's number two.
And
Number
then
three?
number 3 is the
distance, one is
time
hours.
limit.
No,
11 p.m.?
hours hasn't not
Oh,
been addressed yet.
oh, okay.
So number 3 is the time limit to 11 p.m.
I would say 11 p.m. Monday through Saturday, 10 p.m. on Sundays, or 11 p.m. all week.
I'd say 11 p.m. daily,
Okay.
11
That's what
p.m.
most
daily.
restaurants are.
And the time, and do we want to consider opening hours so that they aren't opening at 1 a.m. in the morning?
What are we basing these hours on? Just what we feel like, or
Well, the
is there a
11
standard
o'clock,
business operation we can mirror, or?
no.
No, because
Other
The
we're-
only thing
restaurants.
restaurants have is not when they can open. It's when they have to close.
right.
Unless you apply to become like an after-hours nightclub.
Right.
So it's 11 p.m. for restaurants.
So then that's the only thing, is that the only thing in our power to state when it can close, not open?
That we have a record of.
Okay.
Right.
And currently, we do not have any after hours. Do we
Nightclubs? Yeah, we do.
in this particular area that we're talking about where these food trucks would be, there are no after-hour locations, are there?
No, I can't
No,
tell you
meaning-
off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Because we're specifically talking about laundromats and car washes.
Correct.
Right.
That's all we're talking about tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so we had 11 p.m. recommendation. So those 3 items.
And the I'm sorry, did I miss the opening? What time they can come in?
There was no opening time
We can't
set.
mandate a.
I would suggest 9 o'clock,
9 a.m.?
9 a.m.
So you're saying 9 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Now
Yeah,
you're
because
treating
they could
them differently
actually,
than your
if you don't
restaurants.
put, they could come in at 1 in the morning,
Right.
it's technically
You have a
the,
restaurant that can open at 1 in the morning.
yeah,
Right.
but,
Mhm.
I think 9 o'clock is a good time.
What about breakfast?
Right, and see, that's where you, like your, in the construction sites, they're there at
But this is not gonna
5:30
be
in the morning.
construction site, this is gonna be car washes and,
Well, no.
Well,
because
people
it
s-
won't be.
You can go in and wash your clothes early.
So that's why I'm saying this probably
Right.
needs to be, this probably needs to be expanded, because we're all assuming laundromats are freestanding laundromats, but there are laundromats in commercial shopping centers. So you're really talking about shopping centers. So I don't feel like we can mandate an opening time. I'm fine with mandating a closing time, but I think
Right.
it's beyond laundromats and, what's the other one?
Mechanical car.
Yeah, and car washes. So I think it's a good idea. I think it needs, in my opinion, needs to be expanded. I don't think we need to put closing times on it. I mean, opening times on it, but if we want to put closing times on, that's fine. And if we want to put a restriction on proximity to residential, I'm fine with that as well.
But you see, if you don't have an opening time, then basically they could close at 10 and open at 12.
But
Or 1
that's
o'clock
not
in
a
the
standard
morning.
we
At
have
1 o'clock in the morning.
We can't treat them separately than what we've done to our other business partners. So we haven't made those restrictions on other business partners, so we can't.
Well, what
specifically-
hours do we restrict restaurants from opening, or do we?
That's the whole point.
We don't have anything.
restrictions on opening on restaurants. We do on closing, but
creating
not
more
opening.
Yeah.
But currently,
And
the
it's not
food
even closing a
trucks-
restaurant. Your restaurant doesn't have to close at 11. You just become something different, and you have to apply for special
Right.
approvals to
Even if they
operate
opens at
after
1 a.m. in the
11.
morning.
But there are
Even-
current restrictions for food trucks now. They cannot open prior to the business that they're connected to, correct?
That's correct.
We have 24-hour car washes and 24-hour,
No, I'm in full agreement for what time they can open.
Right.
I just want to make that clear, what
No, no,
time
no.
they can open, what time they can start. I'm in agreement with that. I was just wanted to make the clarification that when we voted on this, the food trucks that were coming in, they did have a specific time to open and close because it was based on the business that they were connected to. So, if everyone is in agreement, I would like to put a motion to approve it with the 3 recommendations.
okay, we have a motion to approve. and
We had
a
a
second.
discussion on this?
Mr.
Okay, I
Mr.
can read you
Eads,
3
before
again.
we,
Let me read it.
just
Mr.
a-
Each, I'm so sorry.
if I may,
Talk over top of you, sir.
let Mr. Eads.
I remember years ago on 119th Street, we had in Councilman Sori's district on the midnight shift. What we had up there was a lot of people on the county side setting up quasi-restaurants, barbecue, what have you. And it became an attraction, and it was almost like South Beach. And all the residents between 17th and 7th Avenue, north of 119th Street, North Miami, were all complaining. And Councilman Sori came out there and he said, we gotta put a stop to this. This isn't right. You know, people want to enjoy their homes and everything else. And I correlate that with what Mr. McDermott was saying about the amount of car washes and laundromats, especially on Dixie Highway. And I definitely think we definitely need a distance in that, because I think it's going to overflow into the residential area. And the other thing that Mr. McDermott pointed out is, how about our businesses that pay taxes, water bills, so forth and so on, occupational licenses? They're going to get nabbed. I'm not against food trucks. I remember what the doctor was saying. We had them over there by Johnson and Wales, and they were a lot of fun, but they usually cleaned up after themselves. And so I think a lot of these restrictions should be put in there. You know, Mike, I don't know, is that laundromat still over there on 6th Avenue, just south of 125th Street?
Yes.
On the west side? So now you have a fast food, you have McDonald's, which is open all night, and then you have the taco restaurant, which is open all night over there. I mean, this could infringe on their businesses too. And there's got to be a balance on this. I agree with the distance, the time, the restrictions, how many feet from the residential area. I'm not trying to put these people out of business, but I definitely think that's necessary. Just a little point of interest, the other day I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal that a lot of not dry cleaners, but car washes want to have a restaurant alongside of it. They found it was good. We have one up here on 146th Street, I think, in Biscayne Boulevard, there's one up there. But,
And I think
so, I mean,
they're doing it again, though. I think they're opening up a restaurant in there again.
are all of, I didn't bring my hearing aids, I'm sorry, but all of these things that we were just talking about, the 11 PM, the distance, the cleaning, distance from the neighborhoods, this is all gonna be included in the proposal to send?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I mean,
And I'll second the motion.
I have no problem with that.
Someone has a question.
Yeah, one more question, one last question here, and we gotta move on this item.
Is there a, I guess, quantity count to how many of these food trucks can be attached to the business?
Yes, I think there's a limitation, I believe there's a limitation of 2.
Got it.
Yep, no more than 2 are allowed to operate simultaneously. That was something you all had approved.
From prior.
Right. Okay,
You don't want to see
All right,
Houston
so-
Highway turned into a nightmare out there.
all right, now let's go ahead and, Mr. McDermott, I believe you had a motion? Ms. I'm sorry.
a motion, I
Ms. Blemur, and the motion was second? All right, I know.
I want to read back to you the motion add-ons.
Thank you.
So first we have, a distance separation between food trucks. We have Ms. Warren's, code enforcement audit, and she'll give you the proper language again. A time limit of 11 PM operating max. And proximity to residential, which again, we'd have to look at that for it to make sense.
Mhm.
And I thought we might have had that in the original. I don't remember, but I thought we had some protection for residential and reducing it in the residential. I'll
Oh,
look
we
at
want
that.
to do that, yeah.
But otherwise, that's what I'm hearing for your motion add-ons.
Mr. Held, I see your hand, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I've been thinking about Mr. McDermott's concern about the reopening, and think there might be some need for a solution on that issue. So it certainly wouldn't be 9 o'clock, because even though some of us sleep later,
Right.
there's a whole contingent of our
Well,
citizens.
I get up at 6.
Okay. So I'm, are you trying to think of some parallel analogy? And do you want to use a microphone? We need some mobile microphones.
So two of the options that we were discussing off mic was one, regulating the opening time through administrative site plan approval. Staff will be looking at it anyway. When they approve that administrative site plan, the business or food truck, in this instance, is required to set forth what their operational times are. So that's how we lock them in. That's how we know what their times are, and that's how we also will enforce it, where if we see them operating in the middle of the night, code enforcement, again, will be the ones to come out, or the police department, if it's late night, to come out and say, look, your administrative approval is only from this time to this time. Knock it off and shut them down. So that's one option, is to control it through the administrative site plan approval. The other thing that me and Debbie were pondering is, because we do have a construction regulation section in our code that sets forth the construction hours in our city, we could maybe justify the timing as far as the opening
What are the
times and tie it to
construction hours,
that.
Jennifer?
What is that?
What is that?
No, I don't, but, the construction hours say when construction can start. So, because of noise, because of those concerns, you know, all we're talking about. So it could mirror that start time, because that also allows,
For the-
the
why don't we
food
use
truck
that-
who may want to have breakfast. they can
Yeah,
have
but why don't
breakfast.
we use that construction time then?
Excuse me, sir?
Why don't we use that construction time as a
And
starting
that's-
point?
That's something that staff can determine in between this meeting and the city
Right.
commission meeting.
Correct.
And I recommend that instead of the administrative site plan approval, because if code is
Right.
going out, they're not gonna wanna have to maintain a list of who starts when.
Right.
And something
So-
uniform would make a lot.
And,
Yes.
and if there is a uniform time standard when construction begins,
Let's
that we
use
are
that.
within legal legal rights to
Okay.
also use that as our time frame.
To the
I
ma-
think
and
that's
to the
the
maker
solution.
of the motion, is that?
Well,
Mike,
well, hold on.
Charlie?
There's
Yes,
still a
that's right.
conflict within it. Is that,
Oh, we are limiting the amount of vehicles that can be on the property.
We did already.
We did that already?
That's in
Okay.
that's in the original ordinance.
yeah,
Mr. Clark.
if I understand it right, then there's a conflict, because we were tying the trucks to the business hours, now we're tying into construction, so there's a conflict. How do you
No, we
resolve
would
that?
use that same time that the construction period is, we would use that as your start time.
In lieu,
Only for businesses that operate beyond normal business
got
hours,
it, okay.
Right.
Okay.
like these two businesses.
Like the 24 hour, if it's 24
Yes.
hours, then you would tie
Right.
it.
Right.
Other than that, you would use the normal business.
The normal
Okay,
business
Right.
hours,
fine,
right.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you
So
for
that's a
clarifying.
bit of a clarification to our motion, is that this is for businesses that operate 24 hours.
Right. Okay, are we all clear now? Are we ready to move this?
Okay. we'll
Nothing
try
else
it.
needs to be added?
Let's try it, shall we?
Okay, so,
All right, we have a distance separation. We have Ms. Warren's audit code enforcement. We have an operation hours of mirroring the construction start time ending at 11 PM. We have the proximity to residential. Like, pick it all up?
Mhm.
yes,
And I didn't hear the vehicles, how many vehicles can you have on
It's
it?
already on the code.
It's on the
It's in the
first
code.
It's
one.
already in the code.
Oh, it is, okay, thank
yes.
you.
What is the proximity to residential
The-
triggering? What is the provision then? I thought that was gonna be tied to a start or finish or closing time, and we didn't use that.
That's a
so-
different thing they want. They want
Right.
a distance separation. We have the distance separation, and then a separation from a proximity to residential.
Right, but what did, I'm.
Distance separation between
That
the
one-
food trucks.
That, between food trucks?
Is that what you were
That's a
asking?
separate.
That's a separate one.
Separate issue.
That's a-
And they both required analyses, that's why
Yeah.
we're not able to be too specific on either as far as the
Right.
distance.
Yeah. You're
So-
requesting, you're requesting that. We don't, we
Yeah,
can't be
so-
specific on that
So
one.
Ms. Love,
Yes, Mr. Hill?
the way, and you're more familiar with this than I am, the drive-through restrictions, which are actually in this package, so
Mhm.
because I can't get online for some reason. So it sets like a minimum 100 feet from single-family residential.
Mhm.
So there's a minimum, there are other minimum 100 feet from the edge of the drive closest to the intersection. So usually you use that distance to trigger a regulation. So I'm just trying to figure out if you're setting a 100-foot minimum, and I'm not sure that you set it, but
It's requested at this point by Planning Commission. The challenge with this is that, does that say you cannot be within 100 feet, or the placement of the vehicle has to be beyond the 100-foot? Like the drive of a residential, single-family
Okay, well,
residential.
we're already setting the time limit, so
Yes.
maybe that's sufficient.
That one's easier to function.
Right, I'm just not sure where you're going with the 100 feet, and I think it's worthwhile to try and clarify the intent of the commission
Mhm.
if you're making a recommendation that there be some sort of 100 feet trigger.
I'm not making a recommendation. This
No,
is coming
okay. No, I
from
understand.
Planning Commission at this point.
Okay,
And I
so
don't know what that
My
what
question
that
to the
is.
commission is, do you need a 100-foot minimum distance from something, given all the other things that you're making a recommendation on?
I believe, Mr. McDermott, you had the question regarding the distance, is that correct?
Not the
Well, if you wanna-
distance, not the distance separation from food
Between
truck.
trucks, this is from, let's say, from the right-of-way, from
Well,
single-family
those,
residential.
but also I think there needs to be a distance, you don't want two food trucks right next door to each other, okay? I mean, that just, see,
allow them
as,
to be
as,
two
as
per
Commissioner Each said, here's the problem, besides all the other problems with trash and code enforcement and all the other stuff, is that we have local businesses who actually pay taxes and pay water bills and et cetera, et cetera. They're going to be impacted, particularly if you have them congregated in a very small area, because we have so many of these car washes and laundromats and everything else. It's going to have a negative impact. As I said, I'm not against food
Right,
trucks.
but Mr. McDermott, you are recommending a distance separation between trucks on
Right,
different sites.
right.
There's already a limit of 2, and I don't think there's a distance separation between trucks on any one site.
No,
Yeah, that,
So I
that
don't
would
think
be
you need to
impractical.
single
especially,
these kinds of sites out to separate food trucks on the same site.
no, I mean, I
But
think he's,
what I wanted to try and clarify is
the clarification is, you know,
100 feet from residential or something else?
well, all of the above.
Right,
Two different
right.
things. One from each, food trucks from each other, okay?
And I'm saying you don't apply that to any other food truck in the city. So why would you add that to this?
Because you're going into a whole nother
Well,
area.
no, yeah, but Mike, if I may, you have an event where you have two food trucks
We're
that,
talking about events.
No,
We're
we're not
well,
talking about-
no, but I'm using that as an example. Even every day, you may have an ice cream truck and then a food truck. And they want to park next to each other, or the guy has two food trucks. One is a dessert truck and one is a,
No,
the
I'm
main
talking about
course.
locales, like,
Right,
it doesn't matter
on
if
one
there's two.
site.
On one site, I'm talking about that there's from another site.
So so are we taking the residential distance off the table then? Or are we only concerned with the distance between trucks? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, both of them are in there. We just don't, we don't have clarification, and this is.
I just want,
It, yeah, it's your decision on what recommendation you want to make.
no, I wasn't the
So-
one who brought it forth, so I'm just asking, whoever the commissioners who brought forth the distance, is that still an item on the table? Or is that an item to be removed and our focus needs to be between the two trucks?
Meeting the two sites.
The two sides, yeah, or,
Between sites.
yes,
This is being separated from residential.
correct. Because then we don't need to have that argument, we can take that off and just focus on what we need to focus on. And since we're not hearing anyone speak up, I'm assuming that's off the table. So then the focus is between the trucks, between the two sites, right?
Right.
Right, and that's
Between
already
two
part of
sites.
the recommendation,
Yes.
so let's just go forward with that.
So right now, we're going to look at distance separation between sites
Right.
that allow a food truck. The code enforcement audit, the time limit is, the opening is tied to the construction start time and the closing.
And 11
at
o'clock.
11 p.m. That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Getting back to Commissioner Blumer.
Motion on the table with, Commissioner Blumer, seconded by Commissioner Medina.
All right. No further discussion. Motion has been seconded. I'll call for a vote. This will be a roll call vote. Ms. Blumer?
Yes.
Mr. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Ernst, yes. Dr. Medina?
Yes.
Dr. Medina, yes. Mr. Each?
Yeah.
Mr. Each, yes. Mr. Clark?
Yes,
Mr. Clark, yes. Mr. Bob?
Yes.
Yes. It passes unanimously to go forward to City Council. Thank you for your patience, staff, and for helping us get this clarified. I think it was important that we do have everything listed in there, and we thank you for indulging our input. I know it took a while, but this is the best way to, and proper way to get this settled.
Indeed it is, sir.
Thank you.
Indeed it is.
Okay, that concludes everything as far as what we have for items. Is there any, let me get to the end of my thing here, so I keep everything in order here. Hold on. Please forgive me, I'm flipping through pages. I'm looking for the end of my meeting here. Order. Is there any further communications that we need to have before we go to new business? Staff?
No, sir, there are no committee reports and there are no old business to attend to.
Okay. In new business, I want to be able to recognize a member of our community who would like to address the commission with a brief presentation. And Mr. William Previtel and I had a discussion. I forwarded the information to staff. He would like to be allowed to address our commission with a brief presentation on some items that he would like to be covered in the upcoming comp plan. We communicated via email with what I, at my discretion, would allow him to discuss. There are 3 items, I believe, that he would like to address, and I wanted to allow him to speak for 10 minutes, if that's okay with everybody. There will be no public comments during this time. It's not an advertised item. So he was asking time to make the presentation, which I said he could. And please make note that no action on anything he says tonight will be taken. And he had agreed to all those conditions that I addressed in the email. I further stated to him that if there were any questions from our council as to regards to what procedures we need, and if the council had any input before he begins his presentation.
No, sir, I think you laid it out.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Prevotel. Thank you for coming. I'm glad to see you again, sir.
Likewise. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Debbie Love for her assistance in getting to this point as we're trying to usher through these items. And I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak this evening to introduce this item. I had kind of thought that we were doing this so far in advance that it would have been one of the items that would have been published, but as it had been when I presented to the City Council some months back. Anyway, if you would, please allow me to preface this by saying I believe all of us know where people here have a lot of experience with the city. And I think we know that the city has been going through some difficult times and continues to do that. It is through this commission that many issues such as the water supply, the sewer, the sanitation system, our aging infrastructure, our aging buildings are all of concern, and they all cost greatly. And we don't really know where exactly that money is going to come from. In recent months, we've had these deficits with the City Council, millions of dollars that they'd have to overcome. We've let off, I believe, 160 plus, give or take, people from the city. People are struggling. We're going into another, as all of you know, when you go into an extended economic rise, at some point it comes a rather devastating downfall, and that is before us. That'll be happening in the next, between now and, but no longer than 2 years from now, probably coming very soon. In light of that, it would be nice to, I'm trying to propose some items that would help us enhance the city, strengthen the city, take advantage of certain items that might be easily done as text amendments so that we could go forward with a better financial standing and with a better environment overall. If I can read through the beginning, then we'll get to a couple of pictures, I guess, and hopefully I can work this. If I may read through the PowerPoint, please. Zoning enhancements, this is a presentation of 3 proposals, each of which addresses pandemic concerns, better quality development, and the need for increased tax revenue, amongst other things. Proposal 1 is to adopt a live-work building type. Right now, we currently have a residential type, we may have office types and such, but this is a hybrid, true hybrid. Proposal 2 is to exempt the lower 25 feet of building height, meaning if you had a zone that was 50 feet high or 100 feet high, rather than having units going right to the grade, it picks it up so that we can use it for other purposes, whether it be pedestal parking or whether it be better lobbies and just enhancing the building at all at the developer's expense. Proposal 3 is to encourage taller structures in general, and some zones in particular. So if we can go through each of these. The live-work building type. Our shortcoming presently, North Miami has very little or no first-rate office space. Many residents need to commute to reach far locations. Our lack of quality office space devalues all properties in the city and the entire city. What's the solution? Facilitate live-work arrangements as a viable building type. And now we've experienced this. It was It's a concept that I've had for many years, and going through the pandemic, I think everybody's now pretty familiar that, hey, it's possible to work from home. It makes a lot of sense and actually becomes more efficient overall. So as a viable building type for new multifamily buildings, provided ample space, power, and light is planned to meet office requirements. And in doing this hybrid, we would propose, it would have to conform with the most stringent of requirements, meaning the residential is more stringent, so therefore it would apply to all that. If there is something that's required to achieve an office setting, then that would be required also. So it's getting the higher standard of both to result in this hybrid. The benefits, this would create time savings and space efficiencies for occupants. Live-work arrangement reduces commuter traffic, which is always the perpetual problem. Everybody complains about traffic. Recognizes work-at-home option as a permanent trend and results in increased demand and resale value for owners. Let me also at this time point out that we have our society functions in a way such that we go home for X amount of hours, 12 hours or so, and then we wake up and we get in the car and we spend so much time there, then we spend so much time at another building while our home sits vacant. Even though the air conditioning, the heat, whatever it is going on, the mortgage is still going on, and you go to this completely separate building for a few hours, which was heated overnight and cooled and all the rest, and then you go back. So we now have two buildings and all the inefficiencies of that going on while we could be combining it into one. And that happened during the pandemic, and that's why there's a lot less demand for large office space. These are not the slides I was hoping to bring. I'm sorry we had a technical malfunction, but here's a floor plate of a possible tower. It has through units going to it with a balcony going all the way around, but it's going from left to right. Each of those spaces are about the exact same size, as a matter of fact. You go from the rust-colored one to the blue one to this gold one. You see that it's a very compact core. The open space along the perimeter allows for different uses, and there's a consistency of this core going through. And you can see in this slide, and I'm sorry, it's just the one little example, but the unit in the blue to the left is really a mirror image of the unit to the right. But on the right, we're showing that it could be set up, it's preemptively, or not preemptively, it's initially planned so that you could be using that for an office layout. It could be at that top side of the page and having 4 workspaces, a conference table, and 2 executives. And that could also be moved down to the other side where we show 2 beds and a master bed. That could also be 2 executives and the workspace down there, or the entire space could be made into office space. But there's a chance of having both your live and work without the idea of just having a desk in your bedroom. It goes beyond that. It's trying to have other support systems, and so it becomes a credible operation, credible for living and credible for office operations and for having other people join you there. On to the second subject, exempt lower 25 feet of building height. Current shortcomings are developers are compelled to fill building from ground up. We've seen this time and time again, where they're allowed 3 stories or 5 or 10 or 40, or if it was 100, and they can get money off of every one of those floors, they will bring it right down to the floor and start from there and say, hey, I got to get my money out of this. And that's why we've seen that time and time again, and that's why we have many of the buildings, actually it's been very stagnant for 50 years, but we have some of those situations. If they were able to say, hey, if I don't have to lose the income opportunity and you'll give me the possibility of having 25 feet, hey, we might do something better with that. We might use it for these other purposes. So it's going down from the ground up. Grade level apartments are less private, less safe, prone to flooding. Parking ends up encircling the building, losing the opportunity to have a green setting. The solution here is exclude the first 20 feet of height beyond allowable building maximum, restrict all zones, if you use more spacious lobbies, pedestal parking, breezeway features, and/or retail. Benefits: promotes pedestal parking, resulting in more green space, encourages grander and more inviting lower usages, minimizes chances of locating apartments at street level, and establishes economic and design incentives for developers. The developers would be paying for this extra opportunity. So it's up to them to do this, but it would enhance the neighborhood as well. 1 minute. And here's some images where you have in our city maximum paving, minimal planting, exposed vehicles. You have another case where we have less privacy, the cars look right into the units, less security, and you're prone to flooding, bugs, infestation. Here's a case where the height was restricted probably to that all over 35 feet that we had, and they're using shrubs as security from that first floor. It's a very clever entrance, though, in this case, so they make it look like it's a 3-floor entry. But seldom can you achieve this and have this opportunity or that cleverness. Here's a case where this building, which is one of our biggest and best in the city, this is it. One of the highest, about 1970, and the units go right down to the grass. Now, what's changed is, and this has come before you, I'm sure, is here's something with when greater height was allowed, they were able to do a more interesting base. I'm not necessarily condoning the entire aesthetic of this, but you can see that there are more interesting things happening at the base once it's been allowed to go higher. That's coming soon. 3 is our encourage taller structures. Our shortcoming is height-contained projects promote bland housing sprawl. It goes all out.
Try to wrap
Stunted
it up
buildings
if you
lack-
can, Mr. Provotel. Try to wrap it up soon.
This is the last part. Stunted buildings lack amenities, efficiencies, and views, and compromised structures mean compromised community, which is pretty much what we've attained after all these years. We're talking about, isn't there a plan? If you look around, you got to ask, do we have a plan here over the last 30, 40, 50, 70 years? So, our solution is to increase the allowable building height in multifamily zones, residential designations to match the Solomia 450-foot plus height, parameter of the Bay Shore zone and elsewhere, calling out the Bay Shore zone in particular. Benefits are encourage grand apartments and amenities luring high-end buyers, alters high winds to potentially preserve neighborhoods, which it would disrupt the wind pattern and therefore possibly preserve the neighborhoods, establishes economic and design incentives for developers, and fosters bigger and better towers to yield greater tax income, which we so desperately need. North Miami has realized practically nothing in the last 50 years in terms of substantial building. Miami alone now has more than 50 buildings that are more than 500 foot high. Most of these top 10 towers were built in the past 10 years. Here's a quick run through of that. Here's the top 10, 650 feet, 650 feet, 697 feet, 700 feet, 709 feet, 734 feet, 764 feet, 789 feet, 817 feet, 868 feet, and what's proposed at the Waldorf downtown, not on the water, just downtown, is 1,049 feet. So, what height is allowed in the North Miami Bay Shore zone? This building is composed of cubes. Would it be the equivalent of 7 cubes? There are 9 cubes shown. The equivalent of 7? Are we the height of 5 cubes? 3 cubes? At 1,049 feet, if 9 equal cubes, each one is 116 feet and a half each cube. The Bay Shore zone is 115 feet. Meaning if you look at that rendering and the Bay Shore zone, you are actually less than the lowest cube for our prime location. And that's part of the problem with our city. We've done so much micromanagement and the minutia of things and trying to get rules and regulations that it's stifled it. We have suffocated our city. We have 70 years of suffocating. And,
All right, sir.
You know, that's the sort of the conclusion is I think there are things that we can do better that are more allowing, a little bit more insightful, and I think we need to create those opportunities to invite the bigger and better. and to get things the way you'd actually like to see them, not that we've so manipulated things that it becomes this horrific setting. How is it that everywhere around us have all these incredible things happening, and year after year goes by, and if you ever had somebody visit you, would you take them here to anything? Maybe aside from the Mocha Museum? You'd go everywhere else but here. And it's time that we need to change that. Look around and see what the opportunities are. I hope you'll consider this. And I think we need to do something radical soon, because we're going to get bitten by this in the coming months. And it'd be better to have these things in place as best as possible, the jobs, the fees, the long-term revenue. And it doesn't come from, as much as we need workforce housing, and as wonderful as it is, we're not going to get revenue out of workforce housing. We need to do something more high-end. We need to get stuff that's going to get sold in the open market that will then get additional revenues, taxed at a high rate by people that won't even come here and use it. That's what we really need. So
All right.
thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Bill. Always good to hear your input and your ideas, and we welcome that. And you know, again, encourage you to approach staff in the future with anything that comes up. There will be public hearings involved, and I'm sure workshops regarding any changes to the comp plan. I'm sure, is that correct, staff? That you know, anything.
As we go through the comp plan process,
Right.
many of these recommendations would require comprehensive plan amendment. And we're trying to limit comprehensive plan amendments at this time,
Right.
especially something
Right.
as creative and as
Right.
beyond what we normally do. So during the comprehensive plan process would be the appropriate time to have those discussions.
Right.
But whatever comes out has to come through administration to staff. Now,
Right.
when we start working through the comprehensive plan, that's when we'll have these public meetings and these ideas can be heard in the public forum.
Right.
And then the community can say, hey, I like that idea, I want to move forward with that idea. You're never going to get everyone to agree on everything,
Right.
but that is certainly the appropriate time to have those discussions, because
All
they
right.
will require comprehensive plan amendments.
Great. Thank you very much. I move for a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Do we have to discuss the next meeting, which we did earlier, and we discussed the time, so we're all set with the next meetings, and that'll go out. You have to post that pretty soon, I would imagine, right? Both meetings. All right, motion adjourned, seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.